Hello, and welcome to Real Film Snobs. I'm Angela Yeager. Pleased to have with me back on the show once again my good friend Chris Andresen. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Hi, Angela.
So, Chris and I are here in winter wonderland of Salem right now. By the time you see this, of course, it will all be gone. So, this is a perfect day for taping a TV show because we have nothing else to do
That's
except
right.
for tape a TV show and watch movies. And that's what we're here to talk about today. Chris and I are going to be reviewing four new movies. Many of these are awards contenders from 2023. So, I'm just going to launch right into our first one, if that's works for you,
Great.
Chris.
Yeah.
And our first film is Ferrari, which is a biopic starring Adam Driver as Enzo Ferrari, the entrepreneur who, of course, started the Ferrari company. And it's focused on some key moments that happened during the summer of 1957 when he has an important race coming up that might determine the future of his company. Penelope Cruz stars as his long-suffering wife, and Shailene Woodley stars as his mistress. We'll get into that in a minute. So going into this, first of all, it's a Michael Mann film. I am a fan of Michael Mann, but Michael Mann is a director. He's highly technical director, and that's where he's the best in this movie. The race car scenes and the one in particular, the very
Mhm.
famous crash, is just really, really well photographed and really excellently kind of choreographed and photographed to the point where when I saw it in the theater with a pretty good amount of people, several people gasped, out loud. So I would say that the car scenes are very well done. What I had a problem with in this movie, and the reason I can't recommend it, is the personal stories. I Penelope Cruz basically steals the movie as his wife, but we're supposed to believe, as human beings, that someone would leave Penelope Cruz for Shailene Woodley, first of all, and that Shailene Woodley is Italian. And she goes throughout the movie doing this Italian accent that kind of goes in and out. The casting is so bad there that I can't fathom of all the beautiful Italian actresses in the world they could have cast, because I don't think anyone's going to this movie to see Shailene Woodley. So I don't think it's a name thing. Why they cast her, I have no idea. But it was very distracting, and much of the movie is focused on his personal life, particularly his kind of this love triangle, if you will, or this fact that he kind of wants to leave his wife for this other woman who he's had a child with. And so much of it's focused on that. And I felt like the car scenes, good, personal scenes, bad. So there's my review. Chris, I'm curious to hear what you had to think of it.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I mean, come on, Penelope Cruz. I mean, she's so beautiful, even when they, I think, try to make her not quite
They're
so
trying to make
beautiful.
her uglified. I mean, they put like dark circles under her eyes,
Yeah,
and
like
it's
stressed
like she's
out and
still,
grieving. Yeah,
yeah,
but I love her. I mean, she's still beautiful. I love her nuanced performance as sort of a grieving woman and also someone who's got her own kind of strategies, business strategies. She's very smart and intelligent.
yeah,
Um, I think for me, probably the personal stories saved the film for me because I'm not particularly interested in the car racing aspects. Although that one scene that you're talking about with the accident, I mean, that is awe-inspiring in the worst way.
yeah,
Just because it's so, I mean, I don't know, as special effects go, I think it's pretty impressive,
yeah.
and is a complete gut punch, especially I think seeing it on a big screen with a group of people in a theater. So I do think that's probably the way to see it. Um, yeah, it's not going to be at the top of any of my lists. Not that I make lists every year. I mean, it's a solid film. I think people will enjoy it. But maybe it's a two or two and a half, three, somewhere in there for
Hmm.
me.
Yeah,
Because I think the
I'm
acting
giving it
is
two and a
good.
half. Yeah.
I think the acting is good. I like Adam Driver in that main role. I think he does a good job. It's an interesting ensemble in terms of all the different little people that are in it and the insights into, racing, including the, writing letters to your loved ones before you race, just in case the worst happens. And it's crazy to me that race is allowed or was allowed to happen, driving basically really fast through populated areas with people.
Right, regular residential neighborhoods, really, or
Yeah.
like they're it's not a racetrack. They were racing in the community, in the city or in the country in that case. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure it was quite exciting for, communities, but it's hard to imagine. So as a sort of slice of life at a period of time in a specific place, it's kind of interesting in that way.
Yeah, and I'm giving it 2.5. I just felt like the casting of Shailene Woodley I felt was a real disaster and made it hard to believe that he had this mistress that he was, you know,
Well,
and
and it
then I,
starts, doesn't it start though, like that she's fleeing persecution, like the Holocaust, and so maybe there's a sympathy thing in there too. Sympathy
well,
mixed
they met
with
during
sex.
World War II, but I don't think it was that she was fleeing. I think they met while they were, yeah, it was a little unclear. That was one of the
Yeah,
other issues I had with it. Some of the backstory things they get into are a little unclear. And I agree with you that like racing movies can be a bit boring for me as someone who's not a car person. They did a pretty good job of, trying to make that as exciting as possible, but none of the drivers, for instance, are given much of a. There's one driver who is they give a little bit of a story too, but not much. So none of those characters are really fleshed out, which is another problem, right? When something happens to them while they're racing, you don't feel bought into it because you haven't gotten to know them as characters. So because it
right.
is so focused on Enzo, but he's not the one doing the driving one. He's the one sending those
Yeah.
guys out to risk their lives. So yeah, so it's an interesting movie and definitely very well photographed and it looks great.
Looks
So I'll
really
give it that.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing visually.
Okay. So the
Great.
next
Well,
one
our
is yours.
next film is Poor Things, which is the latest film directed by Yorgos Lanthimos, who some people maybe know from one of his first films that really became known to us, which was Dogtooth. He's been nominated for a bunch of awards and he's won a bunch of awards for things. And I think, if, to me, he's one of the more interesting filmmakers. I mean, I think when you go to his film that it's going to be an event,
Yeah.
and that it won't necessarily be a conventional film. And I would say that Poor Things fits into that mold. So Poor Things stars Emma Stone as Bella Baxter, who's a woman who essentially jumped off of a bridge to kill herself while pregnant, and who is reanimated by William Dafoe's character Godwin Baxter, whom she refers to as God throughout the film. But the twist, I guess, is that the baby's brain is put into the woman's body. And so essentially the film begins with the Emma Stone character Bella moving and thinking like an infant or small child. And then over time, you kind of watch her progressing into a woman, exploring, among other things, her sexuality and her ambitions. And along the way, Bella essentially has adventures and encounters a menagerie of characters and arrives, I would say, towards the end at a very sort of self-actualized place. It's a little bit like science fiction. There's comedic parts to it. Certainly, it's dramatic. I would say, though, it's one of those things where it's very strong in terms of its ensemble of actors and characters. I think there's mostly strong performances across the board, and it's a very lush and beautiful looking film. So I think even when you're looking at kind of ugly things, they're still done in a very artful and visually exciting way. I would say that some of his more recent films, like The Lobster and Killing of a Sacred Deer and The Favorite, were maybe more challenging to a mainstream audience. And so I think this might be one of his more accessible of his recent films, assuming that you're okay with nudity and sexual acts, but at least in terms of the
Graphic
story,
nudity. I'll say
yeah,
that.
the story on the whole, though, is pretty compelling, and I really like that. I felt it had a very pro kind of feminist point of view, where
Mhm.
it's pro woman, pro sexuality of all forms, pro aging for women, and then arguing for female freedom and autonomy. So, and I also think it has a very satisfying ending, as his films go.
Unlike most of his
So.
films, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as ambiguous maybe as some of the endings of his films can
Mhm.
be. So, I just think that it ends where you want her to be. At least it did for me. So I think it's a great film. How about you?
Yeah, I loved it. It definitely is a 4-star film for me. Although I do agree with you, it is in some ways, it's almost weird to say this because it's in a lot of ways a very odd film, right? Like a lot of his films, it's esoteric, it's his own everything from the music, which I loved. I have to mention the
Mhm.
music. The score was done by a musician who had never done a movie score before. They use a lot of harp, which you don't hear a lot in film scores, and that's very distorted. And the visuals, which shot on film, but highly manipulated. He's using fisheye lenses. He's switching between black and white and color to great
Mhm.
effects. But the story is really, in a way, like you said, conventional. I kept thinking it's like Frankenstein meets Robinson Crusoe meets Alice in Wonderland, and she comes out back out through the looking glass at the end, right? I mean, it really is
Yeah,
Alice in Wonderland. She meets all these characters on her journey. Each one kind of teaches her something. You know, she has the Jared Carmichael character who teaches her about cynicism and nihilism, and she decides, that's not for me. And Mark Ruffalo, who is fantastic in this and should
he's
be
so good.
nominated, in my opinion,
Yeah.
for best supporting actor. Mark Ruffalo is, the total like what's the word I'm thinking of when you're just do whatever you want because
Well, he's
you
certainly
just
a
give into all
cad.
your whims. Yeah, but you give into all
Eh,
your whims. That's his life
yeah,
philosophy. Just do whatever feels good. There's a word for that, but I'm not thinking of it right now. I'll think of it
yeah.
later and then be mad I didn't think of it for the show. Um, but he that's his philosophy, so she meets these different characters who have these different philosophies, and then she gets into
Maybe
socialism for
hedonism,
a while.
hedonist.
Hedonism, yes, that's it. Thank you. So he's very hedonistic, like do whatever feels good, eat, drink, be merry, and
Which
then
I
she
think
meets
she
the
engages with too for a while. I think she even
right,
enjoys
but then
that.
she wants
Yeah.
more than that. And it's
Mhm.
also she's also going through, you remember brainwise some I feel like Mark Ruffalo's kind of her teenage period. She's like wild and just like, oh, I'm just kind of sex a lot with this guy and drink and eat and enjoy myself. But she moves past that. He's still stuck there. And she's kind of like, okay, I need more now. She starts reading books and her brain starts expanding. And so I loved the story. And it is more conventional than his other films in that it's not difficult to comprehend the story. And as
No.
you said, it has a satisfying, kind of wrapped up ending, which is very unusual for his films. And of course, it has a lot of big stars who I thought were just all delightful across the board. He casts comedians in serious parts, which I thought was interesting. There's two comedians for people who follow up stand-up comedy, Rami Youssef and Jared Carmichael, who are cast in
Mhm.
serious roles. And then Mark Ruffalo, someone who's known as a very serious actor in I think, one of the funniest of roles. And then, of course, Emma Stone owns every scene she's in and does a
Yeah.
wonderful job and takes full ownership, including, as you mentioned, all the graphic nudity and sex. Which, so that's if that bothers you, this may be not the movie for you. But I would say, other than that, compared to his earlier films, as you mentioned, particularly compared to something like Dogtooth and The Killing of a Sacred Deer, it's
Oh my
way more
gosh.
accessible than that.
Yeah, those I
Yeah.
think push you into some crazy places. And I don't think that the sexuality is gratuitous. It feels very much in line with what's happening in the film, and it's not just female sexuality, there's male
Oh no, there's a lot of
sexuality.
male too. Yeah, yeah.
So in that way, it's a little bit equal opportunity maybe to try to, balance things out. But it
Mm,
feels, it feels, it feels, I mean, natural for lack of a better word, in a kind of unnatural setup, because there are
sure. No,
surreal
and we're
moments.
used to it. We watch art films, but I think some audiences, especially these days, there's been less sex in films, which has been a talk of a lot of articles. Actually, they called 2023 the year that sex came back in movies because of movies like Saltburn and this one and others. But
Yeah,
um, yeah, so even Oppenheimer had a sex scene, and Christopher
that's
Nolan
true.
isn't known for doing that in his movies, right? So people wanting to bring sex back, I think that's a great thing in film. So yay for that. But I enjoyed the film. I kept thinking, I wish that Yorgos Lanthimos, although I kind of don't actually now that I'm thinking about it, but that horrible Tim Burton Alice in Wonderland remake he did years ago that just looked so awful. And I kept thinking, oh my gosh, like if only we could have had an Alice in Wonderland that looked like this. Because honestly, even if you weren't following the story in this movie, to see it on the big screen, and I do highly recommend this one. I can't imagine not seeing it on the big screen for the first time because the visuals are just so amazing. I mean,
So
some of
yeah.
the scenes when she goes to um, Portugal, and there's like, I mean, and it's supposed to be set in the Victorian age, but it's not period authentic because there's like flying contraptions. There's just all sorts of scenes of wonder. The way he's built this whole world around Bella that I just found it's a fantasy, and I you don't see a lot of that in movies, especially well done.
But I think you would lose a lot of the detail of that scene if you were watching it on a television screen. I mean, there's so much tiny detail even on a big screen.
Yes,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
So it's definitely going to make I don't know if it'll make my top 10, but I'm giving it 4 stars. I have like 15 4-star movies right now, so I still haven't ordered them yet. That's coming later, folks. That's February or March.
I was gonna
But
say,
yeah,
this
when
is
I
why I don't
order
make
them,
lists. It's too hard.
It is hard, but I'm recommending it. How many stars are you giving it, Chris?
I mean, I think it's a 4-star film, for sure. I don't think it's my top film of the year, but I think it's among the top just because it's really
Yeah.
there's so much about it that's so great.
And it's
So,
not even my favorite of his films.
yeah.
I liked it more than The Favorite. The Favorite I didn't like as much, but The Lobster and Killing of a Sacred Deer and Dogtooth are so darn good that it's hard because those are like almost perfect films to me.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah. But I like the weirder stuff. So I think some people will like this one better. So,
Well, and
okay, we should,
it does kind of make me want to go back and watch some of those other films again because it's been a while. So,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Well, you got
Yeah.
time now. We have snow.
That's
So we should
right.
move on.
That's
We should
right.
move
All right.
on.
Our next film is The Iron Claw, which is another biographical sports drama, kind of like Ferrari, but this
Yeah.
time it's about wrestling and instead of cars, and it's directed by Sean Durkin. Durkin directed a film in 2011 that I really liked that has a name I'm never going to remember. So as I look at my notes, called Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene,
Oh, I love that movie. Yeah.
which is about a woman interacting with a creepy cult leader played by the
With
always
Elizabeth
great
Olsen.
John
Yeah.
Hawkes. Yeah, and
Oh,
John
yeah.
Hawkes is so good in there as the creepy cult leader.
Hmm.
And then he made another film I watched during COVID called The Nest, which is not a cult, but has a kind of a guy at the center who's got a whole sense of himself that's being grander than he really is, and then goes through this whole kind of missed ambitions and things like that. So I'm starting to see a theme between culty, unrealized men who then inflict their pain and misery on other people. So if Durkin has a tell, that might be it because
Yeah.
the Iron Claw tells the story of professional wrestler Kevin Von Erich and his entire Von Erich wrestling family, which is led by this patriarchal father who had unrealized ambitions and who has basically told his sons a lot of what to do, what to think, is trying to achieve his wrestling ambitions through his children, and he essentially has a very passive wife who's living in a very sort of patriarchal and religious frame, so she's not doing anything to intervene when things go awry. And so essentially, the film is focuses a lot on Kevin, but also on his brothers. And there are some really I mean, pretty good actors and I think solid performances in this film. I really loved Harris Dickinson, who plays a younger brother to the Zac Efron sort of main character, who kind of starts to surpass his brother, mostly because he's better at speaking in public. And I was especially taken by the actor Stanley, I think it's Simons, who plays the youngest brother, Mike, who clearly
Mm.
wants to be doing something else completely, music, and who just really has a tragic end, trying to do what his father would like him to do. Um, I would say, on the whole, I didn't hate anybody. I didn't hate anybody in the film. I thought everybody was solid. I didn't even have problems with Zac Efron. I thought this was probably his best role ever, not having seen him in anything. I just can't imagine that he's done anything better than this. But um, it's based on a true story, and except for knowing that in the back of my head, I grew very weary of this film. It was sort of one tragedy after another, and
Hmm.
I think the film is too long. I kind of liked the Sweet Resolution, which is totally imagined in terms of the brothers post tragedy
Yeah, it seems tacked
reconciling,
on.
but beyond that, I just at some point, I mean, for a while I was willing to go along with it, but there was a point where I just grew weary of the father. I thought, why are they still in this cult? Why haven't they all figured out a way to do something else? But if you've got an overbearing father, I can see how that, could potentially be a thing. And at any rate, I don't know that I think it's going to be people will love it. I think people have loved it. It's showing up on lists, for the year, and it's probably going to get some awards, especially things that are voted on by people, audiences, as opposed to critics or fellow actors or filmmakers. But yeah, it's not a great movie, I don't think.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up the director's previous films. I'd kind of forgotten he'd made those, and I've seen The Nest and Marcy Magdalene made the one with the long title that I can't
That's
say,
right.
and that's his best film.
It's so
So I mean,
good.
he's kind of going down with each one. I thought The Nest was
Yeah.
good, but not great, and I think this
Yeah.
one's just okay. I'm giving this one 2.5 stars. I had a lot of the same issues as you, as I got very weird halfway through. I thought, okay, I see where this is going. So, like, each of the brothers is just gonna let this father run them into the ground, quite literally, and
Mhm.
nobody's gonna do anything. And I could see it was going in that direction. And I just got very weary of it. It's not a, I know some people were like, I don't care about professional wrestling. Well, don't let that keep you from seeing the movie because
Right,
it's
it's
really
kinda
not
like
about professional
Ferrari.
wrestling.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's not really about professional wrestling. It's really about this family and how messed up they are, this
Mhm.
toxic father. But he's so toxic, and the brothers, they just keep going to the point where towards the end I was like, why would you still listen? Why are, like, the fact they were even the couple remaining brothers were still wrestling, it was just mind-boggling. I mean, I guess it shows you, like you said, the mind control. The character I felt was so underwritten and such a wasted opportunity was the mother. I mean, you mentioned
Mhm.
she's docile, but in a way she's not. Like when they would come to her to try to talk to her, she just like talk to your brothers about it. Like she just, they show she's very religious, but they also show like she talks about, for instance, that she loved her husband because he played piano and he had these different things about him. I just I had a hard time wrapping my head around a mother watching her six sons just fall by the wayside one by one and just not doing anything about it. And
Yeah,
if
it's
that
almost like
is
letting
true,
them
then I need to
go.
understand more why she would be like that. I needed more her character written
Yeah.
a bit better. The actress playing her is great. It's just that it's not her performance. It's just very underwritten, and it bothered me because they keep showing her just putting on another funeral outfit, and I thought, what mother's going to keep doing that and not speak up against her husband? It just is mind-boggling. And I know it's about patriarchy and self-control. I mean, and not self-control, but control and all that. But it just and it's too long. It's 2.5 hours, and it could have been cut easily for the amount of story they had. So yeah, I agree with you. Good performances, and I agree with Harris
Mm.
Dickinson, who I just think is a amazingly. I mean, I almost didn't recognize. I mean, you see him in like something like Triangle of Sadness, where he plays a male model, and then you see him here, and it's just like his, and in Scrapper, where we saw him as the dad. I mean, he just has such a huge breadth. I mean, these Irish actors are just kicking butt. So
Yeah,
yeah,
he's
really
great.
good.
Well, and I think the only way I can make sense of the mother before we move on is just to think of it as a cult. I kept thinking like if it's a cult, then I understand why you could eventually not be pushed to do something else, but the
Yeah, and
amount
I
of
guess
control is
the whole
crazy.
family had been sort of brainwashed by the father from a very young age. Even their name had been changed. Von Erich was a name he made up as his stage name that he made his sons take, which is also
Right.
bizarre.
Or this idea you've
And
been cursed, because the
yeah,
curse too, right?
the
There's the curse
curse
of the
too.
family.
And then the other thing that I have to mention really quickly is that I looked up on Wikipedia about this family because it's very famous, and there was actually other brothers that aren't in the
Oh,
movie. They actually eliminated a couple, so there was more tragedy than they even portrayed in the movie,
well,
which I
and
think they should have added the other brother in because one of them made it to his 20s too and was also a wrestler, and they just eliminated his character.
oh, well,
The
and
director thought it would be too unbelievable.
well, he's not wrong maybe about that. And I think some of the ends were not exactly true to reality either, because at the end there was something about one of the cooperation of the family, kind of similar to Maestro, and it indicated children of one of the characters we watched who never had children in the film that we watched. So, I think
Hmm.
there's a lot of liberty with maybe the actual history. I guess if the point is you're just trying to show the tragedy of a family, almost like a Greek, myth,
Hmm.
then focusing in this way probably makes that more
Yeah.
efficient. So,
But
but we
definitely
should
good
go.
performances across the board. But I want
Mhm.
to get to the next one because
Yeah,
this might
Fallen
be my
Leaves.
favorite movie of the ones we're reviewing. So, Fallen Leaves by the great auteur Aki Kaurismäki, Finnish director. This is his 20th film, I'm happy to say. So he's still going. That makes me very happy. It's about two middle-aged workers who are in dead-end jobs who fall in love. It's a very simple story. I love describing the story of this movie, but it's about so much more than that because in a Kaurismäki world, nothing is quite as it seems. The woman Ansa, who is played by the great Alma Poisty, in a fantastic performance. It won't get recognized at the Oscars or anything like that, but one of my favorite performances because she's um, in typical Kaurismäki fashion. For those who haven't seen his other films, the most famous probably being Man Without a Past, but he's done so many other films. Ariel, Matchbox, Factory Girl. Help me out, Chris. Name a few others when you get a chance. But many, many films, many great films. His characters are often, his style is very terse, and the characters speak in kind of a deadened, style a lot of times. But what's beautiful here is that when the characters fall in love, you feel it come across the screen, even with their kind of deadpan delivery. And as always in a Kaurismäki film, you've got people sitting in a bar, smoking and drinking. There's a band playing, a great band in this case, a
Mhm.
female duo. and just this wonderful portrayals of people who are living on the edge, who are barely scraping by to make it, who are flawed people, who are not good looking Hollywood look people. There's no Charlize Theron, there's no Bradley Cooper. These are just regular looking people. He never casts great beauties. You know, they're just regular looking folks who fall in love. And it's very, very funny. I saw it with a group. People were laughing quite a bit. And so I feel really disappointed that this one didn't stay in theaters longer and didn't find a bigger audience because it's really funny. It's an actually good romantic comedy, which we're always
Mhm.
saying there's no good romantic comedies. Here's a good romantic comedy.
Mhm. Well, and I love the side character of the friend who's, the karaoke friend who's
Oh,
always
he's
worried that
awesome.
people perceive him as being not young enough, and yeah, there's, like, a lot of really great little
The
moments.
side characters are great. And the
Yeah,
dog,
the
there's a cute
dog,
dog in the movie.
yeah.
I mean, come on, people. He's a street dog. He's great.
Yeah. I think it's a pretty wonderful film, and I think it's kind of a great film in the sense too that it works on a couple of levels. So if you're like a deep kaurismäki or film lover, film, history, film snob, it's
Hmm.
gonna have little Easter eggs and things that you'll find that will make you feel happy and delightful. And if you're someone who's never seen a film by this filmmaker and you don't have a deep love of films, you're gonna love it at that level too. I mean, I think it's kind of a film for everyone. Like, we've had some films recently where you struggle to think who would I recommend it to. I can't imagine anyone I couldn't recommend this film to. It's just really delightful, and I love little touches about, like, if she's gonna have him over, she has to go buy another plate, another fork, another,
Yeah, she's only got
cup.
one. She's very that's solitary. She's never had anyone over. She owns one
Yeah,
fork and one
that's
plate.
right. Just there's some really lovely touches, and it's so beautiful. I mean, visually beautiful, the colors
Oh,
are amazing.
he
Your
uses
wall actually makes
primary
me think of
colors.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, he uses a lot of primary colors, dark greens, dark blues, like very, and just beautiful settings. So like even though they're in a poverty situation, it doesn't, it's not gray and miserable looking. And there's these touches where every time she turns on the radio, and again, you start to think, what period are we in? Until she turns on the radio at the beginning and you hear about the Ukrainian war going on, you realize, oh, we're in contemporary times, but no one has cell phones or big screen TVs or iPhone, iPads, or, there's none of that in his movies. But so it's very stylized. I would hope that everyone would like this. I don't want to know the people that don't like this movie.
Well, hopefully
But
people will look for it. Maybe it will win some of the international awards or things like that that will put it on
I
people's
know. I'm hoping
radars.
at least it will be nominated for Best Foreign Language Film or whatever they call that category now at the Oscars, Best International Film. I
Yeah,
think it will be nominated. I think it's going to be hard to beat Anatomy of a Fall, which seems to be on a trajectory to pick up all those awards, which is also a great film. And
right.
I don't be, I don't feel bad about that. But this is such a great film. For those who do have streaming, this one is coming out on Mubi. For those who have it pretty soon, as an exclusive release there, or find it on demand if you can't find it in on any other streaming services. I think it will be on demand here pretty soon, but
Yeah,
because
but
I
try
think
to
it might
find
be out
it,
of
I think.
theaters. Yeah,
Yeah,
if you can find it at your local theaters, please do. But it's
that's
just because
right.
I loved seeing it in the theater, and we did have a few friends that had never seen one of his films before, and they still did enjoy it. So you're right, Chris. I
Mm.
think whether you're a fan or not, you could enjoy this one. So okay, to wrap up, Ferrari, we actually agreed a lot this episode. We both gave that about 2.5. Poor Things, we both gave 4 stars. Iron Claw, we both gave about 2.5-ish. Would you
Or
say
maybe
that
even
was,
less for me. I don't know. I might be in
yeah,
the one
maybe
and a
two for
half.
you? And then Fallen Leaves, I'm giving 4 stars. What is it for you, Chris?
I think also four.
Okay. Hey, look at that. We agreed a lot more this episode. No May December arguments. So, okay. So go to our website at realfilmsnobs.com. Find us on YouTube and hit that subscribe button. As always, thank you to Chris for being on the show. Thank you very much. Have a great day and great movies.